Hello, and welcome to Armenian Enough, a podcast about life and identity in the diaspora, with your host, Lara Vanian-Green.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Armenian Enough. I know I always say how excited I am to speak to my guests, and that's because I love hosting this podcast and getting to interview people about things that genuinely interest me. And today is a perfect example of that. I am absolutely obsessed with reality shows about romantic relationships. Just ask my husband. From The Dating Game to Love Connection, 90 Day Fiancé to Indian matchmaking, you name it, I've watched it. So I don't know if you can quite imagine how incredibly excited I was when I first heard that there was going to be an Armenian dating show. My two guests today are the executive producer and the director of the Armenian Dating Show, and I am dying to get some behind the scenes info, but first, let me introduce them properly. Anthony Abaci is the co-creator and executive producer of the show, as well as the founder of Miasin Inc., which is an entertainment platform and event company focusing on Armenian audiences. Anthony has previously produced documentaries for brands such as Spotify and Uber, and worked with artists from Tyler, the Creator, to Marshmello. He is now pivoting his storytelling talents to showcase aspects of his own Armenian community. Zoe Malhotra is an Indian-American storyteller with a focus on documentary filmmaking. She's a graduate of USC with a background in production design and art direction. She is dedicated to making authentic, inclusive, and impact-driven films. As the director of the Armenian Dating Show, Zoe provides a much-needed non-Armenian perspective. Welcome to the show, Anthony and Zoe.
Thank you for having us.
I'm so glad you guys are here.
Well, I'm glad you like the show, and I'm glad you shout out 90 Day Fiancé and Indian matchmaking, because we'll probably talk about both of those later, right, Zoe?
Yeah. I mean, as I was trying to prepare my thoughts for this intro, I thought I can go through the decades. I can go through like the shows in the 60s whose reruns I watched in the 70s and then 80s, and like I've watched an embarrassing amount of reality TV, all having to do with relationships, but I loved this one. And Anthony, I was talking to you, I think last week, and I mentioned that when I first heard about the show, while I was excited, I was picturing something like The Dating Game, where you'd have, one contestant separated by a wall and 3 eligible bachelors or bachelorettes. I'm really dating myself here. But that's what I was picturing. And this is so different, and it's really good.
Oh, well, thank you. I guess, Zoe, we did a good job, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so great to hear. We're just excited about the reactions that's everyone getting. Basically, it's just that people are getting some sense of like joy and entertainment from watching it. That's like our bottom line, is that it's something that can bring people together and actually have a fun time watching it together. So we're really excited about that.
I mean, you've definitely done that. After an episode goes, or even in the morning when we know an episode is going to be released, I'll be texting with my friends going, okay, watch it, and then we'll all talk afterwards. And we discuss it, we dissect it, we have a lot of fun because, in the community, we know all these characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that's been cool about the reception of the show is, the show is so much about community. Armenian culture is so much about community. And I've just been honestly flabbergasted how many watch parties we have seen. And not casual, a friend comes over, but 5, 6, 7, 10 people coming over to watch episodes. And I'm so glad that people are able to come together over the show and enjoy it together, text their friends, and have this communal experience that we felt making the show, but also something we wanted to articulate through the show.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I was just going to say, I also feel like it's so much of a testament to why we set out to do a dating show in the beginning, and also why we wanted to release it on YouTube, so that it was something that's digestible, entertaining, and also accessible, because I think, to what Anthony was just saying, it's been so incredible to have people all over the world be able to watch it and, watch it at different times and be able to just pull it up on their TV or phone and, my like siblings who are in college are watching it with their roommates who are from all over the world. And so it's just an exciting experience. And I think it's such a testament for us, really like rewarding for us to see that it kind of affirmed the original intentions of doing something that everyone can watch together, of like a dating show, and also releasing it on an accessible platform like YouTube.
Yeah, and I definitely want to hear about how the show came to be. But before we delve into that, I wanted to ask each of you just to share a tiny bit about your background and the role that Armenian or Indian culture played in your upbringing. How did your culture infuse your childhood and your upbringing?
So you go ahead, because I think everyone who listens to this podcast knows about Armenian upbringings, but I think your background is, unique, in so many ways, but also similar to our upbringing.
I think that I had it's hard to say like, oh, a similar experience to what, a lot of American, like first generation, second generation kids had, or if it's a different experience. I think it's, there's a lot of similarities across cultures and vast differences, but my family is Indian, and I feel like I definitely grew up, we celebrated Diwali, Holi, a lot of like Hindu holidays, grew up like traveling to India to visit grandparents, going to, big crazy Indian weddings, getting henna, just a kind of a lot of things that when you think about, you're like, oh, that's like very typical of Indian culture. I think I was a little removed from the you must marry an Indian and only date Indian, even though I'm getting that now from my grandparents. I think that my parents, being first generation, kind of protected me from that because they had already gone through that experience. But I also say, and I feel like this is something that I've recognized is similar to kids who are born in America but have a different cultural background, that you sort of grow up with this complicated identity or complicated relationship, I'd say, with assimilation. And I feel at times like so removed from the actual homeland, and growing up in a school I think it's maybe getting different now, but growing up that was like predominantly white and predominantly people with like strong American backgrounds, and feeling not sure how connected I should be to like the strong American identity, going through the middle school phases of like being ashamed of culture, like not wanting my parents to post photos of me in Indian dress, just kind of like this weird complication. And then getting older in high school and college, and realizing like how removed that almost like shame pushed me from this beautiful culture that I've grown to love and respect and like just be amazed by. And so it's definitely like a complicated journey. And I think that that's maybe something that a lot of American second generation, or just a lot of American born, but individuals with different cultural backgrounds can relate to. But I think now I'm learning to embrace the like confusion of it all, but also the beauty, and also like the differences that, we hear this all the time. And this is something in the dating show that we talked to contestants that I extremely related to, where it's like, you're not feeling Indian enough. I mean, you're not feeling Armenian enough, or you're not feeling American enough, and you're just feeling so removed either way. And that's definitely something that I can relate to, of not directly like growing up in India. But I think now I'm so appreciative that we've come to a time where it starts to feel like sort of any version of your connection to your culture is accepted. And so I'm still learning about it. I'm still growing with it, but I'm definitely content in knowing that however I choose to like exhibit or participate in the culture, it's something that's worth it, and something that's intrinsically connected to my identity, and something that should be accepted.
I love that. It's what we talk about a ton on this show, is that there are so many different ways of being connected to your culture and embodying that. And that, on the show, obviously we talk about being Armenian, but really it could be anything, right? That you're inherently born with this, and you're inherently enough. And however you choose to relate to that is valid. So a lot of what you're saying is a lot of what we talk about all the time. What about you, Anthony? I know your Armenian background and stuff, but like, what generation Armenian are you?
Yeah, so I'm second generation on 3 of my grandparents' side, but on one of my sides of the family, I'm actually technically third generation, because my great grandparents were orphans from the genocide, and came through Ellis Island, and they were put up in Armenian orphanage in nowhere but Alabama, where they met there. And from Alabama, after they left the orphanage, they got married, created a general store, and then they went to Fresno, California, where my grandmother grew up and everything. So, but I really do resonate with being that second generation, because most of my grandparents immigrated here. I heard about stories of where they grew up, what they went through as Armenian. So I did feel like I grew up as, like an American, Armenian. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, where there wasn't a huge Armenian community, but there was a tight-knit Armenian community. But I went to public school, where the only other Armenians at my high school was like my sister and the other girl who went to church with us at Armenian church. So we were holding down the fort there. So kind of like riffing off like what Zoe kind of talked about is like, I kind of experienced being Armenian in my own unique way of going to church on Sundays, Armenian school on Friday nights, which I always say I'm an Armenian school dropout. I don't speak very well, but, I served on the altar, like I'm an ordained deacon.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't grow up looking super Armenian, right? As the older I get, the more actually Armenian I look. But, my last name, Abaci, is not a typical Armenian last name. Anthony is a Catholic name, right? But my middle name is Dikran because my family comes from Dikran, I guess. So it was always like one for you, one for me, whenever there was an argument about hence the show, am I Armenian enough?
Yeah.
So it kind of had that sometimes confusing identity. But I think one thing that my parents and my grandparents always instilled in me was our family has gone through so much for you to be Armenian, and you need to embrace that. And that was a responsibility that my grandparents put upon me, my parents put upon me. I had a strong community at my church, St. Andrew's Armenian Church in Cupertino. They bestowed upon me, and obviously I carry with it what I'm doing today while you're talking to me. Of course, I put that into an Armenian dating show, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, it kind of seems like it seeped through the cracks. This you must do something related to the community, emerge in this dating show. But how did the show come about? Tell us the story.
Yeah. So, it really started in summer of 2020. I had been working on this idea for this company that eventually became Miasin Inc. I had been working on it for about 3 months, obviously with the pandemic, as, Zoe could probably attest to. A lot of the work in the entertainment industry kind of got thrown up in flames because a lot of what we do is in person, and, was really trying to figure out this Armenian entertainment thing. And I was trying to find a show. I didn't start off trying to make it a dating show. I wanted to find a show where it was a new way to explore Armenian culture that non-Armenians could also connect with, but in a way that wasn't super dark. It wasn't always about our trauma, but about the joys of being Armenian. And I kind of really sat in my apartment in quarantine for a few weeks trying to figure it out. And Alexa Demary, my co-creator of the show, her and I, a few months prior, had been watching the show that you talked about earlier, 90 Day Fiancé. And from watching 90 Day Fiancé, for those of you who don't know the show, there's people who they meet somebody online who lives in a different country, and they go to that country to try to get a proposal, and it's all this crazy stuff. But in the show, I'm watching it, and I'm going to like Indonesia, Brazil, and Nigeria, and I've never seen anything in these countries before. And through dating, I got to learn about what is it like to live in Nigeria? What's it like to live in a small town in the Amazon in Brazil? I'd never known what that culture was like. And I think that had actually planted the seed for the Armenian Dating Show, where I was like, a dating in the Armenian community is a spiderweb to what is your family like? Do you speak Armenian? Did you go to an Armenian school? Are you, Barska High? Are you, again, like me, I'm Dikon Agertsi, right? Like, how do these backgrounds affect, again, like we're talking about, are you first generation? Are you second generation? How Westernized are you? How more conservative and traditional? So it became this link to all these other branches of what it means to be Armenian. And then so I was kind of working on it, and Alexa is really into dating shows, really into reality shows. And I hit her up and I was like, hey, I have this idea for an Armenian dating show. I don't know what it could be. Also, Alexa's also not Armenian, similar to Zoe. And I wanted to kind of get that, again, different perspective, because there's so many things through doing the show that I realized that I had taken for granted about being Armenian, that Zoe, for example, would be like, that's crazy that you guys do. Zoe brings up, that's crazy you guys have so many Armenian schools in LA. And for me, I just I'm like, of course we do. You know what I mean? I don't think twice about it. So that was really helpful in the very beginning. Of me and Alexa would just do Zoom calls where I would just talk about being Armenian, and we would like take notes. Like we have like this document of like what it means to be Armenian first from these Zoom calls. So that was sort of like the initial seed of how we kind of got started to work on the show.
It's interesting, like the 90 Day Fiancé, one of the things I love about that show is that you always get that culture clash. And when, we all on this on this interview right now, we all have a balance of two completely distinct cultures, at least two. And you can watch this show and say like, oh, that's such an American perspective. Of course, somebody from that country would feel differently or blah, blah, blah. And you can kind of see it play out. But you don't really get that with an Armenian dating show because presumably everyone understands the culture we're talking. We have the common language there. But it reminds me even more of the Indian matchmaking show where they're like, oh, their family comes from where? Like, yeah, no, our family is this kind. You know what I mean? Like it's the same culture, but very different. It would be like a Western Armenian and Eastern Armenian getting together and not really understanding each other's language very well.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I think one thing with the show too that we highlight a little bit more, as the season goes on, of do you want to date an Armenian? Like Zoe, did your parents ever like actually talk to you about marrying an Indian person? Like, did they ever have that conversation with you?
My parents did, but my grandparents did.
So your
and
parents
not in like a serious element of like, we will genuinely disown you if you don't, but they've said like my grandma's like, it would just be so much easier. Like, why don't you, I can find someone for you. So it's definitely common, I would say, or still trickling down.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to that, Zoe? How do you feel?
I mean, I have a great relationship with my grandparents, and I feel like a lot of this is a huge testament to my parents too, of helping, like I really owe it up to my parents to help me and my siblings sort of usher in the guidance of juggling two different cultures growing up. And so I never really felt like crazy pressure from my parents in any sort of realm of dating. So when it came from my grandparents, I just kind of like brushed it off, and it felt like there was a little bit less weight because I was like, all right, you're not really going to get annoyed at me. Like there was still like a good relationship there. So I didn't take it as seriously. But what I did recognize is that this is just a common cultural phenomenon where it's important for Indian mothers or Indian grandmothers to tell their kids to keep it in the family. And so just like knowing that made me so much more aware of like what it kind of takes and maybe made me more appreciative of like the flexibility I think my parents gave us.
Yeah, it sounds like it was more of a preference and not quite a demand of you.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
No, not at all.
I remember telling my parents that just to let go of all of their expectations of me marrying somebody Armenian. And I said this from when I was a kid. And my parents were like, oh, you'll see, you'll grow up, you'll change your mind. Nobody will understand you quite the same way that Armenian will understand you. And of course, my husband today is not Armenian, but he loves everything to do with the culture. So I think I got both.
Well, that's something that, I think you'll see later in the season. It kind of gets talked about a little bit of like the like why of marrying an Armenian, and kind of like what Zoe was talking about. And this is something, my parents always talked about to me is it's not so much marrying an Armenian to check the Armenian thing off the box, but it's a value thing, right? What are the values that we share? What is the appreciation that we share? The dedication to, our family. Because again, there are different cultures who view family differently. They view raising children differently. And I think that core element of it is something that I feel like comes through in the show, because also Armenians themselves have different preferences. You see it on the show about who they care about, what they care about. And so I think that's something that's important that I think with the dating show, for me, at least as an Armenian, I wanted to kind of portray, because I've never seriously dated an Armenian before. Again, the pickings were slim where I grew up. You know what I mean?
True confessions.
Yeah, I'll say, I've kind of viewed everyone who was my age in my church as like my siblings. You know what I mean? That's how we grew up. But But in all seriousness, like I never grew up thinking it was like cool to date an Armenian. And again, like my parents said the same thing as your parents, Laura, of like, you'll understand one day. And I do now, right? Of like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And I think kind of with the show, especially to a younger generation, of there is somebody out there for you that might be Armenian. They may not be, but they might be Armenian because they also might have the same synergy as you, the same vibe as you, the same interests as you. And again,
You know
it might
what?
be, yeah.
Sorry. I'm just thinking like the community has changed so much from 20, 30 years ago when, okay, I guess I was dating 30 years ago. I'm old. Okay. So the culture has changed a lot in the past couple of decades. And I think maybe if we had the same variety of Armenians I'm seeing now back then, maybe I would have been much more open to dating an Armenian guy. But it just, like you said, every Armenian I knew, I kind of went to school with, or my parents were friends with their parents. And it just seemed like, no, thanks. I don't really want to swim in this pool.
Right.
But I don't want to get too philosophical in the talk. I want to talk about how did you decide how the show was going to be? Like meeting the parents first or I think we're following 3 main daters. Mm-hmm. How did you decide all those aspects?
Okay, so admittedly, we had a different format for the show, which I will not reveal because it's really bad in hindsight. So we actually had a different idea that Alexa and I had come up with. And, we had started working on casting the show right as the Artsakh War hit.
Oh.
And so when that happened, we really pumped the brakes on the show because of obvious reasons. So we sort of had, luckily, some time away from the show a little bit in development. And when we had kind of come back in the new year of, is this something we can make happen? I was talking with financiers if this was still something that people would be interested in being a part of. I kind of was starting to think that people were really in love with the idea of the dating show, but they didn't really love the format of the show that we had come up with. So I had spent like a week just watching all these different shows again and just like taking notes on how things kind of came up. And, I was just toying with stuff and I thought, well, like, wait, what if they had to meet the family first? Like, what would that be like? And I kind of pitched the new format to Alexa. Alexa thought it was good. We made some fine tunes to it. And, we thought it was something that would kind of work out. And then when we were looking for a director and we linked up with Zoe and brought Zoe on, Zoe fine-tuned the format even better, where we were able to kind of figure things out where it had, again, natural, because the thing was too, is we wanted to find a show that had natural conflict instead of like people throwing wine across the table and screaming at each other. Because I also understood the great responsibility of the media representation we had of Armenians, where I did I would never talk poorly on another show, but there have been times where Armenians have been reflected very poorly in media, and sometimes even by Armenians themselves, because they think that's what people want. And I knew that's not what the community wanted. We wanted something that we could all be proud of. So finding a place where there was conflict in a first date, like, oh my God, they're going to meet for the first time. Oh my God, they have to meet the family first. Like, what's going to happen? And not in, hey, why don't you, like, talking in someone's ear, like, why don't you tell this person that they should be doing this and that? Like, that's not our show. Like, our show is actually like completely unscripted, like to a T. Like we really let things play out the way they are, like in a way, because like we knew that was going to show who the people were themselves. And that's what we wanted, to reflect each individual in a way that like had natural conflict of, oh my God, you're going to see this and you're going to see that. If that makes sense.
It comes off as very genuine, and the people come off as very genuine too. Very relatable. How did you recruit the Armenian singles? What was that process like? And then double question. And then how do you create an environment where, dating is a little awkward in the first place, especially if it's a blind date. I can't imagine how much more awkward that is with a camera in your face. So how did you create the environment where these daters felt comfortable in being themselves?
That's really kudos to Zoe about the environment. Zoe, do you want to kind of talk to how we kind of did that?
I think that we had a really small, intimate crew, which is sort of what I've learned in documentary filmmaking, so integral to keeping the authenticity of individuals and also just creating that comfortable space for everyone to be themselves. I've done a lot of like verite filmmaking where you're following people for a really long time and just trying to capture them in their everyday life. And it's sort of this element of like, once you're with them for a while, they start to forget that the camera is there. So a lot of the order in which we shot and the way in which we set up the rooms and who was actually in the room for the family meetup versus like, so like in the actual room for all the family meetups were just the two cinematographers and sound people, and everyone else stayed out of the room. So it didn't feel like there was like a crazy amount of people, you know, watching over your shoulder while you're on this, while you're in this like definitely uncomfortable or unnatural situation.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like I think everyone can agree that we all grew really close to the cast, and, you know, we weren't just their, like Tony especially was not just their producer, but also, you know, their therapist at times, their advisor, their friend, their jokester, their dad. You know, we were like everyone to them at times because we really did grow really close with them and we cared very deeply about the cast, and we still do. And I think that's another important part. I mean, from the very beginning, and this was something that when I first came on with Alexa and Tony that they stressed with me and that I 100% agreed with, is that we are not doing a show to like portray anyone in a negative light or like a different or fake anything or try to like force drama. We were really wanting to keep the integrity of what would be normally like a docuseries or like documentary storytelling, and really take care of the cast because they were not people we're like throwing under the bus or anything. They were people that we really cared about, and we wanted to make sure to like prioritize their experiences to make sure that they were the most authentic. So basically, I know that was a long rambling answer, but like in essence, the environment was like honestly our number one priority throughout this entire shooting process.
Yeah.
We always said from the get-go, we had talks, you know, with crew beforehand of just talking about how uncomfortable dating is naturally, and then having to do this like after the pandemic and also just, you know, in front of cameras is such an unnatural experience. So it was always something that was at the forefront of our like process in filmmaking.
But Laura, you know, I think one thing that Zoe touched upon that you and I can relate a lot to as Armenians, and Zoe could relate to this too, you know, in the Indian community too, is in the Armenian community, there's such an emphasis on reputation. Mm-hmm. How do my peers view me? How does the neighbor next door view me? Did you hear about what they said about so-and-so? All this gossip that is not just an Armenian thing, but you could definitely say it's an Armenian thing.
Yeah, it has a greater role in Armenian culture.
Yeah, and like you have to keep in mind, of course, now everyone wants to be on a second season. It's all hoity-toity. I get it, which is great. But for a first season of a show where they don't really know me, they don't know Alexa, they don't know, like, there are a lot of questions. How do I know that you're not going to make me look like an idiot? How do I know that people are not going to talk bad about me? And for us, we had to establish trust with everybody. And part of trust, which to me was a very rewarding experience, was I myself had to be vulnerable with the cast. And it helped me also understand a lot. I learned, again, we can talk about this later, how much I learned about dating from producing a dating show, but that's beside the fact.
Yes, so let's come back to that later, for sure.
I don't know if I want to talk about that, but we'll see. No, I'm just kidding. No, but more so like, you know, about being Armenian and my experiences and being able to connect with Liz, who's on the show, about how the emphasis of my parents wanting to send us to church, you know, every Sunday. Or like in Alex on being a deacon like myself, and like with Tade of like the emphasis of the grandmother teaching you, you know, you need to find somebody who understands you, right? There are different things that I was able to connect with, but that forced me, Zoe, and Alexa, and Abby, our associate producer, and Audie, our production coordinator, and Aaron Cohen, our cinematographer, and Bree, our sound mixer, like every single person, we ourselves became vulnerable to allow them to be really who they wanted to be on the show.
The more you talk, the more I think it's like a very unique convergence of elements, because it's not like there was a great casting call and it's like the next show on Bravo or TLC or whatever. These are people that you had to find and recruit and essentially convince, you know, not just because most people don't naturally probably want to share their blind dating experiences on TV unless they are also actors on the side. And they have to trust you, and they have to trust that, like you said, you're not going to paint them in a bad light. I think that that's hugely important, both the intention from on behalf of production and then communicating that with the daters. How many people did you potentially recruit in terms of like who you ended up actually picking? What was the general pool that you guys aimed for?
So Alexa DeMary, again, who's my co-creator, she's also the casting director of the show. She's our casting guru. If you ever need, like, if you don't want to pay for a private investigator, just hit up Alexa, because Alexa will find anybody. I mean, anyway, I probably should be sharing this story, but one night I went out, I met this girl at the bar, and I couldn't find her, you know, and she gave me her number. Within 10 minutes, Alexa found this girl's LinkedIn. It was incredible.
I'm like Alexa.
Yeah, Alexa is the best. But so sort of what we did was we created a Armenian Dating Show casting Instagram to sort of give a little bit of credibility instead of just like reaching out for my personal Instagram.
Hey,
like,
baby.
Yeah, like, hey, you know, like, who's this creep? So we did that, and we wanted to kind of create something, again, like a little bit of fun and a little bit of joy through just like the casting process. And what Alex and I did in the early stages, again, the bad format phases, like BC of the show, of, you know, we would DM people. And we created like an application where people could also nominate other people. For example, Natasha, who's on her show, her friend Gasia, who she FaceTimes in the beginning in episode 1, Gasia nominated Natasha after Gasia saw it on Instagram. So it kind of became like, I'm not going to say viral or anything like that, but it became a thing where people are like, oh my God, this is whatever. But again, people thought it was a joke. So as we were sort of going through the process, we had some other sly ways of communicating, but a lot of like, hey, who do you know? Who do you know this? And in the summer, you know, when Zoe was on board, you know, we were really using all avenues to find people. And a big thing too is not only do you want to find people who are Armenian, but also people who want to be on a dating show. And then as Zoe and I found, you know, the next hard part is, okay, are they going to match with this other person? You know what I mean? So that was such a process of finding, you know, what is the people into? Do they want to be on the show? Are they comfortable? Again, also like, you know, Shant, Vanessa, and Ari, their families had to be comfortable being on the show. Like there were people who we want to talk with who are like, oh, my dad's not going on the show. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's so many parameters where sometimes I was kicking, as Zoe knows, I was kicking myself like, why did I make such a complicated thing for us?
Everybody that I know wants to know how the singles are matched. Who does this? Is there a matchmaker? Is it done by committee? How are you matching people together?
Laura, if I tell you, I have to kill you.
No, you have to tell me.
I'm not going to reveal any secrets, but the goal was to provide like a dating experience, and we wanted people to find their match and to have like good people matched up with them. But a lot of the singles who we worked with, and a lot of like the intention going into this process during casting that we also let people know is that this is like a dating experience, that you're going to get something out of it. Even if, you know, you don't find the love of your life, like everyone who went on dates and it didn't end up working out still said they had a great experience because, you know, they learned something new about someone else's culture. And I think they learned something new about their own culture from someone else's perspective. And you just get that naturally from dating. And so I think in the intention of the matching process and the casting process, it was never like, these things have to be matched to a T 100%. There was always this general understanding that you're going to get something out of it no matter what. And I think kind of bringing that back to like the larger perspective of dating in general is that like, I feel like a huge lesson that I took away, that a lot of people took away, is that dating with super high expectations can be limiting in the sense of it's either going to be a horrible date or an incredible date. And there's no in between, where you can go on a date with someone and you can meet someone's family. You know, you can jump to that step already and it might not work out, but that doesn't mean that you're like enemies forever. You have a horrible experience. Or, you know, you can maybe have an okay first date and okay first time meeting someone's family and then end up being connected to them forever. It's just kind of like there's this range of experiences. And for me, having the ability to portray that there's so much more openness and acceptance in dating than you would think, and you can gain a lot more from it than just, an ex or someone who you're going to marry. And sort of like working more in that gray area, I think, is something that we always set out to work on and that we talked with cast about during casting. And I also think it's something that a lot of people, including like crew and myself and the individuals on the show, learned.
And Laura, I think that's also what Zoe is kind of touching on too is, you do learn so much about dating from seeing other people's dates as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a big thing that we found through the show is there's a big difference between what people think that they want and what they need from a certain person. And that's and it's not like a fault. And look, I'm not trying to like foist this on the cast or anything of like, oh, you said this and that. But that's why you date. And that's why you learn about what you like and what you don't like, right? I may think that I want somebody to be like X, Y, and Z, and I go on a date with someone who is X, Y, and Z and be like, you know what, actually, that's not my vibe. And I think one thing that Zoe did such a great job of when we were working with cast is like about keeping an open mind and being okay to something that's different, being okay to a little bit of change. And I think that's something that in the Armenian community, we can also, learn a lot from. And sometimes it comes down to ego too, of like, oh, I want this, I want that. But being okay to something that may be different than what you expected. And I think that's something that, whether it's portrayed in the show or not, I know the cast got that out of like, I've learned about dating through this process. I've learned what I like and I don't like. And, you see on the show where that works out and where that doesn't work out.
Well, one of the parts of the show that always has me holding my breath is when the daters have to call and either ask for a second date or communicate that it's not working. And I mean, in the real world, that would be amazing because so frequently, one party thinks the date went great and the other one maybe doesn't. And then there's just ghosting that's involved. Most people don't have the courage and the courtesy to call someone and have that conversation because it is a really difficult conversation to have or vulnerable. I mean, it doesn't always have to be end badly, but it's to say like, hey, can we go out again? I guess for that one, you have to make a call. But for you're great, but I don't think we're a match. That's a tough call to make. How did you decide to include that or incorporate that? I'm assuming every main dater has to pick up the phone and communicate with their date.
Yeah, it kind of depends, on whose storyline and timing. And, I think one thing to understand, this is kind of going beneath the hood of the car a little bit, is, from a production side of the show, it's very complex to make a show, period. And then a dating show. And then, on top of that, like, you have something that you also want to make visually interesting to the show, because we are, of course, making a show about real life things. So, in terms of like that element of it, I think that's something that we wanted to do to give the cast an opportunity to talk face to face about it. While also, again, like you're saying, like giving an opportunity for people to give like a proper no or a proper yes. I don't want to spoil anybody who hasn't seen the show, but there's something that happens in episode 3. And I love the way that this person responds to an ask out in episode 3. And I think the way that person, again, no spoilers, conducts it, like, again, I learned so much about how I can maybe act in the world, like not ghosting, but like a proper way to handle it and seeing that. Because of course, yeah, you get the butterflies from watching it. But again, you get something out of it.
And
it's so weird too, because I watched it over Thanksgiving with my husband. I'd already seen it before, but I was like, here, watch this show. I want to know what you think. And there was a date. I won't say which one, but I thought the couple was getting along marvelously. And he was like, oh, she's not into him. And I'm like, what are you seeing? Like, what did you just see that I missed? Because I thought this was working out. And he was like, no. And yeah, one of us was correct.
Well, sorry, I know you're gonna jump in.
Go ahead, Zoe.
So I think also another thing that another like element of kind of behind the scenes is that we really did care about like each person individually. And even if someone was going through an experience that was unfavorable to them, or something just didn't work out in the way that they wanted it to, there's still a cast member that we care about. And we wanted to make sure that everyone had like an authentic dating experience. And when it comes to things like FaceTimes or having these conversations, we knew it was important for everyone to at least talk it out with each other, because we're not choosing one person to come out on the right or one person to come out on the wrong one way or other. We're really trying to have like an even, authentic slate of like, this is what dating is like. And even though we have main characters who go on these dates, we also are very close with everyone they go on dates with and are always working with the people and checking in on how everyone's doing. And we really wanted to show the perspectives as a holistic perspective as we can of how the dates went. And so I think that's one choice behind the FaceTimes, is like giving an opportunity for them to talk about it retrospectively, so that, you know, as an audience, we can understand where everyone's coming from, but also that the individual characters have that opportunity, no matter if they're a main, no matter if they're a date, to be able to express themselves and talk about how it went.
To Zoe's point too, like even calling the people in the show cast or contestants feels weird for us.
Yep.
Like we literally had meetings and the edits of like, what are we putting in the lower thirds to call these people, because we feel them as like friends. Like we FaceTime with them, we text them. We wanted, again, this kind of goes to, you know, the question you asked earlier of like create trust in a community, but we genuinely hit it off with like everybody. And that allowed us to, again, make something that was vulnerable. We also told everybody, look, there's the show and then there's real life. No one hates anybody. There's no bad blood anywhere. But that also came from us we were very transparent through the whole process. We were very honest through the whole process of like what we were doing, how we were doing it. And again, I really do think that comes across in the show in terms of how comfortable, how can you get somebody like Sean's dad to just be himself? It's by just hanging out with him.
I also,
sorry,
I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that's my thought.
I was just going to say, I don't want to dive too deep down this road, but I think it's worth noting that I think when people hear dating show and they hear reality TV, they do have negative connotations with it. And this is something that we worked tirelessly against in the beginning, when we were, you know, pitching this to people, when we were getting people on board, is that some people are like, okay, I've heard that you can alter what they say in the editing room, or you can make us look bad, or it's not going to turn out the way it wants, or it's uncomfortable. And I'm so proud of what we've been able to work for, which is creating this show, which has a format, has a layout, has what we call cast, but doesn't really feel like cast because they're not actors or anything. You know, they're more like, we say characters cast, but they're real people. And, you know, has this like structured format, but it still is authentic in the sense of we really are pushing for almost like what we say is like almost like a docu-series feel, where it's no, you know, like fake punch-ins or like random cuts that don't really like say what someone else is saying. It's really trying to keep it authentic. And this is definitely like a new space when we're thinking about like just kind of general content. We have to, of course, acknowledge, hats off to Indian matchmaking, which was our like guiding goalpost. And I think a huge reason that we were able to do this, because that show had come out and shown people that you can authentically appreciate a culture, demonstrate entertaining dating content without being like defamatory, which is something that we really strove to do. And I think was a huge testament to how we were able to create a lot of that authenticity. But it was a hard battle at the beginning, because there are these preconceived notions that come along when you tell someone you're doing a dating show. I mean, the title is the Armenian Dating Show. I'm sure people have the craziest ideas in their mind when they hear that. And so to be able to like actually create this authentic experience for people was definitely a journey, but it was something that I'm excited that we were able to do, because then I'm hoping for just, you know, the future of this space, that we can create more content that's like entertaining and enjoyable and like is something you're going to want to watch with a glass of wine after a long, hard work day to like take your mind off the craziness of the world. But you also like gain something from it. It's heartwarming. It's informative. It's more in that middle ground.
It's so engaging, and I have like 50 million thoughts as you were talking. And one of them that just keeps sticking out of my head is like, maybe if there's going to be another season, in addition to the dater meeting the person's family, maybe you can also consult an Armenian coffee reader.
Oh, just wait. Just wait. Oh, you got to keep watching.
That's a great idea.
Great idea. You got to keep watching, Laura. Just wait.
That's an amazing idea, Laura.
I think we've learned something about what's coming on.
Zoe, are we able to do some reshoots to put that in the show? I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe we should. That's a good idea.
Volunteer.
Maybe we can call up some of our cast members.
Down. I think you might. We could totally throw that in, Laura.
We're still in the edit room.
Awesome.
That's why you got to watch the show.
Everyone back on board.
So much of what you were saying, it was talking about how your intention and the behind the scenes stuff just really informs what we see and the authenticity of what we see in the final edits or the final clips. So, Anthony, I wanted to ask you, what was your reasoning for including so many non-Armenians behind the scenes, which, by the way, I personally think is a brilliant move, but that I think was done with intentionality as well. And talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I think the first and foremost thing that was the number one parameter, even before being Armenian, and Zoe talked about this earlier, is who do we feel like can help us tell this story the best way? And that comes down to a lot of different parameters of, what's this crew's personality like? How do you think they would react when somebody's getting rejected, when somebody like has a great date? You know what I mean? Like, how would that person interact? And then a lot of what comes with that is like, what's their skill set? What are they best at? And a lot of different things. Like Aaron Cohn, who's our incredible cinematographer, he is so talented. In my opinion, the show looks absolutely gorgeous.
It does.
And I know I'm biased, so I'm glad you do too. But Aaron's one of my best friends. Aaron and I lived in college together with 5 other dudes. We've worked together before. And Aaron's Jewish, but, we'd be eating food to be like, oh, I've ate this in Tel Aviv. You know what I mean? And I knew that he could connect with the culture in a different way. But that allowed us to, of course, bring in people who were talented, but also brought in things that were adjacent to our culture or different than our culture, but could also relate to it. And I think that, again, like I kind of mentioned this earlier, like when I was talking with Alexa when we were first developing the show, and when Zoe and I were first, when we were first working on the show together as well. I've learned this through the years of, and Zoe too, through doing documentary filmmaking, is all of us are just 2% different from one another, really, if you really get down to it. Like maybe our skin colors are a little bit different or our noses are different, but we have skin, we have noses, you know what I mean? We both have big families, right? We may eat different food that our aunties cook, but we're all sitting together. We like to drink and dance. We might be drinking different things and dancing differently, but we're still drinking and dancing. And like we are all so similar. And once you kind of create that bedrock, everything is possible. I'm not a big fan of the word unity because I think that's a flawed term, but we're able to like come together in like a different way and understand each other better. And I think that's something with like, again, the Armenian Dating Show at its essence was I wanted to share my culture with the rest of the world, that you're able to see like, hey, we actually aren't that different. I had a friend texting me literally this morning. He's Japanese and he's like, bro, like, Vanessa's family is my family. You know what I mean? And this dude, he grew up in Tokyo. He's not even like a first generation or second generation guy. And I think doing that, and again, this is kudos to Zoe as well, of like telling a story that was rooted in family, that was rooted in culture, that like allowed us to do that. And how do you tell that story is, well, you bring in people who are not from your culture. And like Zoe's the one who came up with the idea for the rug backdrop. I never would have in a million years thought to put an Armenian rug as the backdrop, but Zoe was able to see my culture, what was beautiful about being Armenian, and be like, hey, what if we did this? And it like blew my mind. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. It blew my mind.
We'll edit that out.
Yeah, we'll
edit that really
out.
Good. It was really good representation. Like it just kind of now is the symbol for the show. I don't know how to say that differently.
Yeah. Like, it's crazy. Like, again, there's always watch parties. I'm sorry to go on another rant, but like somebody at the Armenian National Committee of America in DC, they had the show on like at the end of one of their meetings, and they have Armenian rugs everywhere. And it's crazy to see an Armenian rug on a television too. It's like the rug keeps going, right? It's like a little trippy. But, again, Zoe being adjacent to our culture, understanding relics and things that we appreciate. And this goes to me having to revisit my Armenianness as well, and understanding like, hey, this could be something that we take from our past and put it into our future. And there's big responsibility with that. And we every day had that focus of we need to do this the right way. And part of that is we can't do this alone. That's the thing too. We couldn't do this alone as only Armenians.
I'm really interested to know for each of you what you learned maybe about yourself, about dating. What did you take away from working on the show?
Zoe, take it away, honey.
Oh my goodness, so much. I did want to like real quick tack on to Tony's point, and I do think that this is a learn. I think that there is, especially in filmmaking, especially in like documentary or like working with real individuals and real stories, it's really important to consider who is in your crew and sort of what the behind the scenes looks like. And there's 100% like sometimes, a sacred space for just individuals just from the community who need to kind of come together and they really understand it. And so they're the ones who need to create that content. But like what Tony was saying, the intention of the Armenian Dating Show all along was to just share the Armenian community, period, and share the Armenian experience, period, not just to Armenians, but not just to non-Armenians. And so I think that that's why having that mix was so important. And I think, even in the edit too, we had a mix of Armenian and non-Armenian editors. And it was such a beautiful experience to be able to sit next to Tony with either an Armenian editor or a non-Armenian editor and say, you know what, like, this is something that's important to like call out as a cultural graphic, because as a non-Armenian, I don't know what that is and I don't understand its significance. And Tony and the Armenian editor to be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that, or vice versa, me just glancing over something and Tony saying, hey, this is actually super important to Armenian culture. I don't know if you realize how important this is. We should call this out. So it's like that balance was so important because we knew the types of audiences we were trying to reach. And yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely a huge learn that I got was how to, as a non-Armenian, how to respectfully engage with a show and with a project that is about another culture that I didn't really have an extensive knowledge about before coming onto the show, and how can like I exercise what I can bring to the project, but not like overstep when it comes to elements of a culture that is very sacred and beautiful, but I might not fully understand. And how can, as a director, like I lean on Tony. There were times when we were asking about like Armenian idiosyncrasies, and I had some idea, but I was like, Tony, can you jump in and, bring like your experience as an example so that the cast can kind of understand where I'm going with this. There's basically like a whole range and a whole dance behind the scenes between the non-Armenian crew and the Armenian crew. And it really was in the end, like such a beautiful fusion. And I think for me, really taught me how to move forward in like creating authentic and appreciative content that's about a culture or about an individual, about a family, about a group in a way that doesn't like take it for granted or isn't like stereotypical. And sort of like what that dance and that balance was like was a huge learn for me.
And Laura, before you go back and re-ask this very important question that you asked us before, I think is one thing that I do, again, I applaud Zoe, I applaud every non-Armenian who worked on their show. And this is why we make the show too, is they cared so much about Armenian culture. They cared about learning it. They cared about the issues of it. Everybody on the crew can say the word Artsakh. Like not many non-Armenians could say that word, but not just say that word, they understand. And Zoe would listen. I think listening is such a thing that we sometimes lose in our society, but the crew really did care about not just like, oh yeah, this kebab is great. You know what I mean? But like, understanding like, wait, why doesn't the United States, like why didn't the United States not recognize the genocide until April, right? Like, wait, what? You know what I mean? And like, or some people didn't really know that there was even a war that happened last year. And the crew genuinely cared about it. And a way that we can get people to care about Armenians is through storytelling. And I think that is such a unique and specific example of what this show can really provide for the rest of the world and towards Armenians is that empathy. And I can't thank, Zoe enough. I can't thank the rest of the crew enough for taking the time in addition to their workload, right? Like they're not here to care about my culture. They're here to, make a show, but they did that with everything else going on. And I think that is something that is very special. And Laura, I think that care comes across in the final product as well.
It must. I mean, I think that what you've done here is brilliant in terms of making something that is, pretty much 100% Armenian, about Armenians, by Armenians and non-Armenians. I totally lost my train of thought. What I was trying to say was that I think it's really incredible that we have something about our culture that doesn't focus on the genocide or the war. Yes, it's mentioned, but as sort of a background explanation, this is, like you said, something fun, something very human, like who can't relate to dating and love and trying to find the one for you that is so universal, and that you add a flair of our culture to it, and that people can enjoy something Armenian that is lighthearted and takes a different path than all the other stuff. I mean, the only thing I have to compare this to is maybe like when Anthony Bourdain went to Armenia or something like that. You're exploring the food, you're exploring some part of the culture that everyone can relate to. And I really appreciate that. We definitely needed this.
Well, I'm glad. And I think this kind of the sharing of like the little moments, and the people in the show are everyday Armenian. The people in the show are not Serge Tankian. They're not Kim Kardashian. They're not Cher. You know what I mean? And that is super important. There's nothing against Serge, Kim, and Cher, but that story needed to be told too. People who look just like me, have the same interests as me, and are just like me. And that was something that I think we've seen with the reception of the show, of like, people are like, oh, Queen Vanessa, like Team Sean or whatever it is because they're people who are just like us.
They're so lovable. They truly are very, very lovable. But I don't want to let you get away without answering the question. I have been paying attention. What did you learn about yourself or about dating or about anything? What did you learn from making the show?
Tony, tell us what you learned about dating.
And should I call you Tony? I've been calling you Anthony. It feels very formal now.
A lot of people close to me, you can call me Tony. A lot of people close to me call me Tony. A lot of people in the film world call me Tony, because when I was first starting out in LA, you would yell at people who were in the lower position to get you something. And Tony was easier to yell than Anthony. Yes. So that's why Tony got started.
What'd you learn?
Yeah. Well, okay. I think one thing I definitely learned about dating is I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think the thing about dating that I've really learned is like how much really timing matters, but not in like the way I feel like we sort of voice excuses on of like, oh, is it long distance? Is it this? It's that. But like, where are you in your life right now? And where is the other person in their life right now? And like, you see that on the show where like, I'm not going to say who, what, when, or why, but like, there's some people who maybe in a different context, they would have matched better, right? But maybe when the timing of like the cameras were on, or maybe they were flustered and nervous because of the show or something like that, like those things affected the turnout. But how much timing and knowing like where you are personally in your life and what you need, again, like I kind of brought this up earlier about like, what do you want versus what you need? And a lot of that goes from like going on dates. I mean, there's a lot of little things we learned. I mean, the only thing Zoe and I learned is keep your first date short. Keep your first date short and casual. No, seriously. Like, Here's Tony's top 3 tips for dating.
Okay.
Keep your first date short. I'm totally not prepared for this. This is going to go off the rails.
That's fine.
Keep your first date short and casual. Because I think one thing that Zoe and I also learned was you want something to look forward to in your second date, right? Like you could be in a different headspace. You want something to look forward to and like learn more. Don't put so much pressure.
To be desired.
Yeah, at least something to be desired, like you want something going on there. I think second one again is understanding what you want versus what you need. What is the perception you want people to see who you are with, and try to get rid of that and see like who do you really want to be with? Because so often with social media, with kind of like how you see like in celebrities, like who's dating who is like, oh, I want to be with this person who has this physical type, this person who has this personality, and this, because that's how I want people to perceive our couple. And I think that's such a flawed perspective that I think as you get older, you start to kind of get rid of. But when you're younger, one thing that I've noticed, and again, I've noticed with myself, I've noticed with friends, obviously, from doing a dating show, is really look at what makes you happy, what makes you feel the most comfortable. Life is so short. And like, I hate how at a young age, I'm learning that like every day of how short life is. And why would you not want to spend time with somebody who makes you happy? Because who's going to be there when the lights are off and nobody else is around? It's the person who you love. And so really understanding like what makes you happy is something that's super important. And my third unprepared Tony's tips to dating is, I don't know, Zoe, what's your third
I was going to say, did you
I thought you did three.
This rant?
Did I already three? Okay, great. Go on.
I have a third. I'll add on to Tony's. I feel like this is a little bit, and in my typical fashion, it's not going to be something snappy and short, but this is a little bit what you were just talking about, which is don't judge a book by its cover. And my cover being everything you see on social media, everything your friends tell you about them, everything you think you know about them before actually going on a date with them or just taking the time to get to know them. This is something that I've actually been talking about with my parents, who have loved the show. And I think something that we realized in the midst of making this is how almost traditional the process of having not only just them meeting their parents, but a blind date, a set up date is in our current like dating culture, with just like apps and Instagram and just like everything that you can see. It feels as if you know the person and you have complete access to them based on their online presence. And by kind of turning that in their head and putting people not only in a situation where they don't know who they're going on a date with, but in a situation where that person's already met their family, which is like the most extreme traditional, route you could go before a blind date, really turns that on its head and challenges our current dating culture and an issue, which I think is thinking that you know too much about someone before going into it and kind of having these preconceived notions or conceptions either like let you down or affect knowing the real person.
I'm just going to back that up with something from my life, which is when I've known my husband forever, but when we started dating the last time around, a friend of mine said something like, oh, maybe like this is the one, or what do you think of, could this be like your future husband? And I said, husband. Not only is he not husband material, he's not even boyfriend material. And joke's on me because we've been happily married forever. And so, yeah,
you gave it a chance.
Can't tell.
I will say the success to like my current relationship is that my boyfriend's Instagram handle is not his full name. So I couldn't find him on Instagram for the longest time and was like having
dating tip number 4.
He was like, I was like, who is this person? They're mysterious. But it was kind of like, and added some intrigue. And then finally I found their Instagram and I was like, okay, yeah, it's good, but it wasn't like, it was great. Sorry, Jake, love you. But there's kind of this there is this whole added element that I think there's plenty of positives, but also there's these kind of negatives where it's definitely not healthy for me personally to go into like a deep dive Instagram social media spiral before like actually going on a date with someone. And that is something that our cast talked about, where they said it was so weird and abnormal for me not to know who the person is and I'm going on a date with, or like not to do any kind of recon beforehand. It also allowed for them to just ask basic questions like, where did you go to school and things like that, because you really don't know anything about someone. So you have plenty to talk about.
When you see them meet for the first time on the show, that is the very first moment they are seeing each other for the first time. Like, I don't think people quite understand the gravity of a first date. And then they have to sit down, in front of 2 cameras while being mic'd and have a date. It's a huge bonding experience for them. But I think the sentiment you kind of will, see too is like giving it a chance. And I think also shorter first dates help with giving it a chance, I definitely remember going on a date right before we shot the show that went for a few hours. And at the end of it, I was like, you know what? I saw it through, not for me. And I'm like, if I cut it out at hour 1, maybe I would have gone to the second one. Who knows? But I think giving it a chance, kind of Laura's tip too, we should create a book. Armenian Dating Show tips.
Coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon. But I think those are all things to kind of consider. But also I think one thing you sort of will see, in the show too, is like, it's okay if you're like not ready to date. It's okay if you don't want to put yourself out there in a vulnerable position. I'll be completely honest. When I was making the show, I was so not in a position to date. I was so busy. I had, all this other stuff going on, you know what I mean? And I was able to understand that from doing the show. Like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to be in a rush to date. That's the other thing too with the show. I was like, oh my God, every Armenian's gonna be like, I have to date and get married right away. I'm like, oh my God, I'm part of the problem of all the Armenian grandmothers asking like, where's the wedding? So.
I do have a couple of burning questions. One is I've been reading the comments on the YouTube videos, and Shout out to everybody.
Sorry, real quick. Shout out to everybody commenting on the YouTube comments, because I read every single one of them and I'm dying laughing. So I have to say.
So it's no surprise to you that Sean's dad is kind of like his dark horse star of the show in his own right. And a lot of people are saying on the comments that he should get his own show. So sort of tongue in cheek, if he had his own show, what should it be about? And will you be producing it?
Well, Zoe, I feel like we have to actually talk to Laura about how hard it was to get Sean's dad on the show.
Really? Yeah. I also want to say, Tony, let me know, Laura, let me know if this could be maybe something to be cut out if we want to leave for the audience for mystery. But I do, like, the amount of times I tried to press Sean and Menwa and Henry himself at times on like his dating life. And I know you see in one of the episodes, he says, I don't date, zero, never. And I was like, that's a front. Like, he must be, and I would be like to Sean, be like, come on, Sean, like, you must know, like, what's going on here? And like really try to get that. Cause I was like, he's amazing. He must have people all over him. And Sean was like, nope, I don't know. No dating life. But to answer your question, I personally think that if we did a show, he would have to be some sort of like host or moderator or like advice giver.
Yes.
I will say some of the stuff, and this is something else that I really love about the show, is that like how unprompted so many of the characters are, including, and I like special shout out to Henry and Menwa. Those scenes when Sean and Henry and Menwa are talking together, completely, like, we do not give them any prep. We don't tell them what to talk about. We just start it and leave the room. And Henry and Menwa have given some of the most incredible advice I've ever seen from three men together talking about girls, like some of the most beautiful, eloquent advice. And so hats off to them for that. But also I think that it would have to be in some capacity, maybe Henry the therapist, Henry the advisor.
Yeah.
So Laura, the first time Zoe and I met Henry, we were going to their house to meet Henry, and we were just going to scope out their apartment before shooting, just so we, Aaron, our cinematographer, and Daniel Krutzinger, our gaffer, could just check it out. So we were just kind of prepared to make it look nice and everything. So we go in there, we're talking with Henry, and Henry at first is a pretty intimidating guy. You know what I mean? He doesn't say a lot. He kind of looks you up and down and all this kind of stuff. And Zoe and I are sitting on their couch, same couch that's in the show. And we tell Henry, Henry, you're going to have about, 45 minutes to an hour to meet with these girls. And he goes, I do not need 45 minutes. I just need 1 minute and I know who they are. and then Zoe asks, he's like, okay, well then you tell us what you think of us. And then he turns to Zoe and I, and he points to Zoe. I think he points to me first, and he goes, hustler. And he points to Zoe, he goes, hustler. And then he points back to me, and he goes, player. And he points to Zoe, he goes, not the player. And both Zoe and I are like, I don't know how we feel about either of those. Like, I don't want to be called a player. She's like, I don't want to be called not a player.
Yeah, what does that mean if you're not a player? Like, I was like, let's dive deeper into that.
I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. So
neither of us were happy.
yeah, we were like, what? But you'll get to see a little bit more about Henry and Sean's relationship even deeper as the season goes on. But Henry truly loves his son. And not many fathers would take off work, spend time to go on a dating show for their sons. And I think that bond is something that I think was really special for us to be able to show in the series. But again, I'd like to have a family. I'm an Armenian man. I'd like to have a son, one day, but about like, what would I do for my child to raise them and make sure that they achieve the happiness that they want to achieve. And Henry is very philosophical as much as he has a big jokester. And I think he is somebody who a lot of us can learn from watching the show, aside from the laughs and his, how do I say this? Attractiveness.
Yes.
But he is somebody who I see him as like a father figure myself. He puts his arm around my shoulder. You know what I mean? I'm not some old guy. And he came to our pre-screening of the show and showed up unannounced. I was told he was not going to be there. I was very happy to see the surprise. But he is somebody who genuinely cares about the people around him. And I think Zoe and I and our crew were blessed that we became a part of his care as well. So that was something that I felt was special to me.
He's a very unique character. Yeah, there aren't a ton of men like that who are willing to speak openly like that. It sounds like it was difficult to get him to open up, but you did. And then, Sean just makes himself very vulnerable in the show. And I don't think we've had the opportunity to see Armenian men in quite this light before. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked a lot about the show. We could maybe have another conversation offline, but, Armenian men don't like to be vulnerable. You know what I mean? Maybe the comedian Mary Basmajian joke about it all the time. Like, men do not like to show feelings because generationally we have been told that we have to be the man of the house. You have to protect the family. There are people, again, like we said earlier, I'm third generation Armenian American on my father's, mother's side, and their parents were killed because people were trying to put the Armenians to extinction. And there are these generational roots that portray this need for this toxic masculinity that we have in our culture. And to be able to show Sean and Henry and even people like Tade and Alexon and like all these other people who you meet, that like, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to talk about what you want. And I hope that starts to shed light on like how we create a foundation in our family. If you can start to be vulnerable with your spouse, how can that trickle into family life? And how can that essentially like lead to what we all want in life is happiness? And how can we create a more happier community amongst us Armenians? And that I know is like a really big top level thing, but it's something that we talked about when we were making this show. Like we talked about these things. Again, Sean is our white horse leading us through the charge with like being extremely vulnerable. Like anybody who's seen the beginning of episode 3, like I tear up, you know what I mean? A little bit, so like seeing somebody go through that. And I think that's something that is kudos to Sean and all of our cast members of being vulnerable.
Would you ever consider doing like a pillow talk type show like they have on 90 Day Fiancé? And can my bestie Emma and I be on it? Because we have a lot to say about every single episode. Would you consider that?
Okay, so I'm looking at Pillow Talk on my phone right now because I don't know what
Let me explain it to you.
Tony, you answer first.
This is something you'll like too, because I never watched dating shows before I thought of the idea to do a dating show, ironically. I would watch all these shows. The one show I've never watched, admittedly, I've never actually watched The Bachelor. I didn't want it to affect the Armenian Dating Show subliminally in any way. So I will say I've never actually watched The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. So Pillow Talk.
No, okay. So Pillow Talk is a 90 Day Fiancé franchise thing where
not 90 Day. Okay.
Where people watch the episode. It's other cast members that have been in other episodes of 90 Day Fiancé, but it could be anyone. They watch the episode and they comment on it. Like, oh, look at her. She's doing this. Oh, I think he's telling the truth. Oh, I think she's nervous. And they talk about it like, oh, my mom would never let that, so it's like watching the show with your friends because you're watching people comment while they watch the main show.
Laura, if you help us get to 100,000 views on episode 1 within 2 weeks, I'll consider it. Is that a deal?
I think that's a really big ask, but I'll do my best.
All right. We got a deal then.
Do you watch The Bachelor at all?
I do not.
Okay.
I did when it first came out, but I can't stand that. It's too one-sided. I don't it's not fun.
I fully agree. And this is like a side note. This doesn't have to be a part of the podcast, but it can if you want. I don't know if you like heard about the recent season, but basically they just like had this main character. They had this bachelor, I won't say who was like so boring. It like just spoke in monotone, was so like nails on the chalkboard, like nothing interesting. And that was like the consistent review. And it may or may not have been out around the time we were filming. And I feel like Alexa and I, who also watches The Bachelor, the whole time we're just watching and be like, we're so grateful to be working with natural, entertaining cast people. And we were like, it was like a nice reminder if, you know, someone was having like a low day where they were just not as high energy as they used to be. We're like, you know what, at least they're not blah, blah, blah from The Bachelor. And we can make it work. So.
That's the one show I can't watch for so many reasons. Just cannot watch that show. But all the rest of them I love. Well, thank you guys so much for taking a ton of time out of your day to talk to us. This has been super great. I mean, I don't personally know anyone who's not watching the show, but then again, I keep telling everyone to watch the show. So I think my circle is pretty well saturated with that. But thank you for creating this and for doing such a professional, amazing job. It's great to see something of this caliber that reflects my culture, and it's just done so well. I truly, truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you for sharing the show, and thank you for taking the time to also understand all that went into it behind the scenes. It's validating for us, at least.
Yeah,
it's great.
Giving us a chance to talk about it as well. It really means a lot.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get to interview Vanessa and Shant and see what their impressions were of everything behind the scenes and see how it felt for them. So I think it'll give our listeners a really well-rounded idea about what's happening on the show, and I'm sure they're all watching it. I mean, this is just right up our alley.
Yeah, this was vanilla. You're about to get mocha tomorrow. All right, Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Anthony, Tony.
Yeah. and watch the Armenian Dating Show on the Mia Singh YouTube channel. You can search Armenian Dating Show on YouTube. It'll pop up. Share it with your friends, your non-Armenian friends, your coworkers, your aunts, your uncles.
It's like you read my outro and then said it for me.
The Armenian Dating Show. Do you want me to spell it? THEARM. I got you.
Thank you. You guys, you can watch the Armenian Dating Show on YouTube at Miasin Inc. And you can follow them on Instagram at the Armenian Dating Show and at Miasin. I will include all of the links, and I think they're going to send me more. So I'll include all of that in the show notes for this episode. I thank you all for being part of our Armenian Enough family, and especially those who support us on Patreon. We love you so much. Thank you. Please watch the Armenian Dating Show with your friends and family and share it. Along with this podcast, share it with those you love. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, remember that you are always more than enough.